Here we're going to show cleaning process for the water tube design, be it a 5-to-1 turn down or 20-to-1 turn down. Now here in front of us we have the older model 5-to-1, so this was prior to 2016. And there is a door with a couple of wing nuts that you can loosen up and open up for access. However, you will need to access the sides of the boiler. So in this example we have removed the jacket on the boiler. And we'll have a couple of access points we need to get to. So here we're looking at the left side of the boiler, and I'm going to gain access to the upper heat exchanger. So we have 3 7/16 nuts in a bracket that's going to hold the insulation in position. I'll remove these 3 nuts. Next, we're going to remove the insulation wrap from the heat exchanger. So on the reassembly, the cutout will go over the header. Next, we'll remove the shroud brackets, and there'll be 2 of these. Again, we're working on the back left corner, and the other one will be on the front right corner. These are also 7/16 nuts. So we'll remove these 3 nuts. So here he's removing the bracket on the front right corner. Next, we're going to be removing the draw bolts for the shrouds. Now these will hold the shrouds in tight. The tools you'll be using is a 1/4 inch Allen wrench and a 1/2 inch open end wrench. And it's easier to start with the upper bolts. So on the smaller boilers, you can actually take the shrouds right out the front here, okay? On the larger boilers, they will have to come out the sides. You already have the side panels off. So here I'm showing that we can actually take on the 1,000,006 and 2 million BTU boiler, the shrouds right out the front. Now these shrouds are sitting in a little bracket, okay, that holds them in position on reassembly. So you're going to be lifting these up, and then you can take them right out. On the shrouds, make sure you inspect these gaskets. Make sure they're not compromised. If they are, contact the factory. We'll have to order new shrouds with gaskets. These are not only glued, but they're riveted into position. So on the older models, we had 3 bands, and they were larger bands. This was prior to 2016. The new boilers after 2016 will have a total of 7 bands. 2 of these bands are called Tadpole bands, and they have a gasket as they are positioned at the very top and bottom of the heat exchanger. We'll start by removing the band, and again, on the older models, you'll have 3 bands, larger bands as well, okay? So here we're going to be using a 7/16 open end wrench and a 3/16 Allen wrench. Now on the older bands, you won't have the tabs that stick out. And the reason for those tabs is if these ever loosen due to expansion and contraction, you don't want them to slip. You want to be able to hold these baffles into position tightly. So for now, I've just taken the middle one off. We're going to slide that right out, and then we'll remove the other 2 bands. At the very top of the heat exchanger, you can see the Tadpole gasket. These are found on models manufactured after 2016. Both bands need to fit above the tab on the baffle. At the very bottom in this view, you can see the Tadpole gasket. The Tadpole gasket must fit against the bottom of the heat exchanger. Then the band that is just above it must fit just above it, but not on it. Next, we'll start by removing the baffles. So the baffles will have to be lifted up, kind of at an angle. On the baffles, inspect the insulation. If your insulation is compromised, you'll want to order a new baffle kit, which will include the baffles and the Tadpole gasket bands, as well as the other new bands. Here, we're going to show removal of the blower. We have removed the top panels, all of the ignition components, and the blower wiring. And depending on your model number or size of the boiler, there are different blowers and different arrangements.
On the 3.5 and 4 million BTU boilers, removing the blower, you can disconnect the union and disconnect the blower from this 45-degree flange. We do not suggest taking the blower and 45 flange out as one piece. The reason is down inside is a pilot tube inside the burner. And if you're removing the top of the boiler and then putting it back together, if you bend that tube, you will have trouble lighting it. So the recommendation is that you take the blower flange from this 45 in the union and take the mixing station blower and a little bit of gas train out as one. Then remove the 45 flange.
Inspect your graphite gasket. If it's torn or compromised, you need to be replacing that graphite gasket. On some of the models, under the gasket, you also have another nut that I've loosened for the demonstration. And there should be 4 of them on some of the older models. Let's go. Under the plate, you'll also have another graphite gasket. Remove the graphite gasket, and now you'll have access to the burner. Slide the burner up. Cleaning the burner, easiest way is a warm 5-gallon bucket, warm soapy water. You'll want to use like a nylon or a toilet brush, something with a long handle. Get inside and clean this, and then rinse it through with water. Let this sit and dry before reassembly. On the burner plate, you also have a pilot tube, and this pilot tube needs to be tight against the inside of that burner. The pilot tube has a series of orifices, and that is going to push the pilot gas through the burner where we ignite. So, making sure on the reassembly, lining this up, and making sure this pilot tube is pushed tight to that inside wall. You'll want to do this on top of the boiler. So we're going to slide the burner into position, then your top plate, you're going to line that up, and then make sure that pilot tube is tight to the inside of that burner. So here I'm showing the heat exchanger. Now, to clean the heat exchanger, first of all, it's always good to be wearing gloves. We'll also talk about maybe putting a plastic bag or what have you over the electrical panels. That way you don't get any spray to the electrical panels. A product called Rydlyme works really well on cleaning these heat exchangers. You'll want to use a pump sprayer. So you can use Rydlyme, let it sit for about 30 minutes. If you do need to brush it, use a nylon brush. Other than that, you might be able to use CLR. CLR is abrasive, so we do not want to leave that on very long. You might have to do that a couple of times. So again, pump sprayer, start from the top, spray down to the bottom, let it sit, and then you can clean it. With Rydlyme, in some cases, you don't even have to brush it. However, when you go to remove the Rydlyme, you're going to have the condensate trap off the back of the boiler. You want to remove that condensate trap and hook up a hose. That way the Rydlyme's not getting into your condensate. Now you'll notice down inside there, once you start to clean it, you'll see some debris start to collect. So again, on the final end of the cleaning process, take your pump sprayer and spray that water and get that to come down and out your condensate line. So now we can take our pump sprayer and come down through where the burner access hole would be and spray the inside of the heat exchanger. So starting from the outside first, then the inside from top to bottom. Again, let the Rydlyme sit for about 30 minutes. If you can get a small nylon brush down inside there, that'll be beneficial. If not, again, Rydlyme is the best product. And also, once you're done cleaning the heat exchanger, you'll want to spray that with water. If the heat exchanger is still dirty, you may want to repeat that process 1 or 2 more times. And again, you want to be able to drain that out. So remove the condensate trap, hook up your garden hose, and then you can start spraying with the Rydlyme. Reassemble in reverse order. If you order a kit of baffles, you'll get your baffles with the material already glued to it, other than the Tadpole bands. Let the adhesive tack up for about 5 minutes. So on your baffles, there is no tab on the bottom. There are 2 on the top, and then you'll have a couple more in here. And we'll show you how to actually pull the tabs out. And this is so the bands do not slip with expansion and contraction. We're going to do this approximately every 10th baffle. So now with it assembled, you'll see a tab, and then here's my next tab with another tab. So we have the upper portion of the heat exchanger and the lower portion. The upper portion will have a total of 7 bands. You're going to have 5 regular bands and 2 Tadpole bands. And on the lower heat exchanger, you would either have 2 bands or 3 bands, depending on your BTU input. Make sure your bands go above the tabs so the bands don't slip for expansion and contraction. We're using a 7/16 open-end wrench and a 3/16 Allen wrench. So here you'll notice we're going to offset the nut and bolts. We're not going to have them all in line with each other. Otherwise you create too much pressure on one band. So each band connection will be offset. So here we're going to show the assembly of the first Tadpole gasket. There'll be 2 in the upper part of the heat exchanger. One at the top and one at the bottom of that upper heat exchanger. These band connections are typically at the front of the boiler. On the upper and lower with the gasket, don't tighten this yet. Push it up, and the reason is you have to get above the tabs. So on the upper band, you're going to have to pull the band out and get it above that tab. So here what we're doing is we're pushing up on that band to make sure that Tadpole band is tight to the top. You can use a large flathead screwdriver or any tool that you have in the field. There will be one more band at the top that goes just below the Tadpole gasket. And do not forget, you have to get above the tabs. Just install the nut and bolt and don't tighten on it yet. So again, you're going to have a total of 7 bands. A Tadpole band, one just below it,
You'll have 3 in the center and 2 more at the bottom. If you have any technical questions, please contact the factory at 1-800-900-9276.